Welcome to the Backyard Professor videos. I have two wonderful guests in studio, Derek Lambert of Mythvision and Dr. Richard Carrier, worldwide renowned mythicist, Jesus scholar, Old Testament and Ancient and New Testament history. So let's get this show on the road. We want a boogie. Hey, let me do a quick shout out to everybody who's here. Looks like Trevor Luke, Dan Vogel, Elisa Galyin. Welcome, Doug Vincent. Woohoo! Yeah. And Dan Vogel, welcome, my man. And Wendy Rowland, thank you all for showing up. I have two gentlemen I want to introduce you to who needs no introduction because you all are already familiar with these two guys from other areas, books, podcasts, videos, etc. And I happen to wrangle them into my show. Derek Lambert of Mythvision. Say hello, young man.
Hola, ¿cómo estás?
Hey, foreign language already.
I speak in tongues.
How you guys doing?
Good. Yeah. Yeah, actually, yeah, we had a somewhat restful day today. We did a lot, but
this week
wasn't as intense as we've been working really hard, so we're kind of exhausted.
We will get to that. That's one reason why I was so wanting you on my show, because you have some exciting news, but we're going to wait until the end of the podcast so that people have to watch us all the way through. So we'll let the second half of you guys announce that. So we are excited to have you on the show. Now, Richard, how long have you been with Derek? About the last week, haven't you?
Oh gosh, since Thursday. So yeah, it's been a week.
Tomorrow he leaves.
Damn, we done so much in the last week. I can't believe it's just been just a week. But yeah, I fly out tomorrow. So
and you guys haven't had any fist fights yet or nothing?
No, yeah,
far from it.
Yeah.
Well, next summer we'll have to do all three of us together and have us all in the studio together and see if we can get along. I'll buy pizza.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Hey, Richard, I'm going to put this up right now. I know most of my audience are familiar with a lot of your works, but really, truly, you talk about the origins of Christianity. Now, your PhD is in ancient history. Am I correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Columbia
University. That's right.
Columbia University. Yes. And from that point on, now, hey, what was your dissertation on?
Well, it was the natural philosopher in the early Roman Empire, which I became the scientist in the early Roman Empire. And it uses the Greek word, so it's the physikos. So it's the dissertation title officially is the physikos in the early Roman Empire, but that means the scientist in the early Roman Empire. And it was attitudes towards.
Oh, nice. Oh, you froze up.
The physikos of scientists in that period. No.
Are we here?
Yeah, you froze up for just a quick sec. Not bad.
Shit.
Just a couple of seconds, but anyway. So you've talked about the scientist in the early Roman Empire, and
that's right.
You've been willing to field questions, and you talk about Jesus, and you talk about the Old Testament, and you're an expert in pseudepigrapha, which is one of my favorite studies, and you just seem to have covered the entire ancient world gambit. How did you get interested in ancient history?
Oh wow, that's quite a question.
Big question.
When I after
Oh, you're freezing up for just a second. Oh
I got out of
man.
the Arctic Water Patrol, or is this just?
I didn't do anything.
Okay,
Okay, it's
No, I
okay.
took
You're
that.
back. You're back. It froze for a
we're
quick
back.
second.
All right.
Yeah, you're back for just a second. It's in and out.
Service. I went to college.
Everybody in the neighborhood's on the internet. Kids are home. I
Really?
mean, yeah,
That's
maybe
killing our
everybody's on the
internet
Wi-Fi.
access.
I don't know.
It's on a Thursday
Well,
night.
we had-
I wanted John. Okay, you're here now. You're here now. Keep going.
I don't know if we're going to jump in and out. That might be an issue.
Yeah.
So when I went to college, I sampled various majors, and in the process of doing all the requirements for the upper to get a major, basically you have to do breadth studies, right? So you have to do history and science and life science and physical science and all that stuff. And in the process, like all the other majors, I found were too boring to pursue, and I fell in love with history. And I fell in love with history because in college, I didn't know this at the time until I went to college, but they teach it completely differently than in high school. In high school, I hated history because it was just memorization, names and dates, memorization. It was just, ugh. And it was almost most stuff that just wasn't even interesting stuff to study. There was some interesting stuff, but not a lot. But in college, of course, it's method. How do we know these things are true? And it's causation. Why did these things happen? And so that's way more interesting. Like, why did this stuff happen? Why are things the way they are? Historical causality, and then methodology. How do we know these things? You know, what do we not know for sure, et cetera? That made it way more interesting. And of course, you know, because it's adults, they can talk about way more interesting subjects. And so all of that got me. I'm in. And then when I did Western Civ 1, the whole Roman Empire section, I said, I really am fascinated with this culture. Like, this is it. I'm going to do this. I'm going to study Roman Empire studies because it's got me, right? And also, but at that time, I was becoming an atheist activist because in the midst of my military service, I abandoned Taoism and then became basically an atheist and started getting more involved in the online community at that time, that was a really long time ago. So I was involved in atheist activism and counter apologetics, right? So
yeah.
I thought, all right, look, if I do Roman Empire studies, it's history, it's a field that has really got me fascinated and it's got me passionate. And I'll have the skills. I'll have Greek, the Latin, and the period, and the literature, and the whole background for engaging with Christian apologists for the atheist community more effectively. Because I said, yeah, I'm going to get a PhD. That will be basically the two simultaneous functions of this. And then my other track in my life, of course, is modern naturalist philosophy. And what was really fascinating when you study like Roman history, Greco-Roman history, is that that's the origin of naturalist philosophy. And so that helped my philosophy work as well. So that was the reason. And that's when I got into it. And it was really Christian apologetics that created my dissertation as well, because at that time, there was this fad for claiming that Christianity was responsible for modern science, and that the pagans they're mentally broken and didn't have any of the right ideas and couldn't possibly have done it. They needed God and the Bible and Jesus and stuff. And so anyway, I was like, no, like they don't even have like any of the facts right? Like, I'm not even an expert yet, and I can tell they didn't have the facts right. So I was like, someone needs to write about this. And so that's what got me involved in that, is basically to build my ability to rebut that argument, ended up becoming my dissertation. And so, and in the process, of course, I'm getting more involved with the secular web as an editor there, and then editor-in-chief eventually. And then I'm constantly doing a lot more work in Christian apologetics. And so that's where I get my pseudepigrapha experience and my Bible Greek experience and all of that. And while I'm going through grad school, I'm applying my skills to these research projects at the same time. And so that's how I ended up with New Testament studies background at the same time.
Nice. I just wanted you to note the post on the bottom of the screen. My good friend Trevor Luke, ancient history in the house. He is also a Roman history expert.
Oh, nice.
He heard I was having you guys on, and he said, man, I want to watch this. This will be great. So here we all are. Derek, I have a question for you, my good brother and friend.
Yeah.
How did you hook up with Richard? How did you two first?
When was the first time? I don't know.
Initially,
It's
I
been a
think I
while.
was extremely early on in my YouTube career, and I was exploring. Well, first thing that happened was, as a deconverted Christian or starting to realize there's problems. Once you start realizing the Jesus that's portrayed and let's just say some of the things. Remember, I was a fundamentalist most of my life. So
right, yeah.
some
you
of the
have
things I saw, I was like, okay, when you take it seriously and you investigate it using historical real tools that help us try to analyze this and then compare it to other figures and stuff, I'm like, why do I not say they really did that? But then I say Jesus really did that. That just doesn't add up for me. So I started to go, holy crap, none of this is true. And Jesus is really the sun and astrology, Acharya S stuff.
Okay, yeah.
So S-U-N.
I came in through a totally fringe mythicist model.
Mm-hmm.
And then had heard about Richard and knew that he blew off the Acharya stuff. But, what does Richard really know? And then,
he's a new kid on the block.
He's this guy, just, but then I actually found out that this guy named Robert Price lives an hour away from me.
Yeah.
So I went and interviewed Robert Price. He's an hour away from me. And I sat at his foot for practically 2 years. But at the end of the day, that's how I started getting involved with you. And then I ended up having you and him on an episode together. And I was like, this guy is sharp. And in fact, you kind of wonder sometimes when he debated Bart Ehrman, you wonder, Richard would have probably just been more succinct.
And I would have debated entirely differently. I would have brought up different skills or different points. I would have rebutted him more. So,
both bring their fascinating information.
People who want my Monday quarterbacking on that debate, there's an article on my blog where I have a whole Fisk review of the Ehrman Price debate about how I would have done that differently.
But at the end of the day, I connected with him, and then it was.
Did you and I do that? Did we do a show? Maybe it was
we did
else.
on the Bart. Ehrman,
right.
If you were to debate him, how would you answer this?
Yeah. So there's a show on Mythvision.
So you've had Bart Ehrman on your program also, I've noticed.
Oh, many times. Yeah.
And I loved the interview with you and Richard and Dennis McDonald. And I do believe, I hope he got here tonight. If you have, say hi in the chat, Dennis. But I'm going to be doing some discussions with him on my show.
Awesome.
Probably after Thanksgiving. Yeah, he is. I love the interview with all three of you guys too. And Dennis has shown an interest in being on my show, so I'm going to really enjoy sharing his stuff. Just blows my mind, just like some guy named this guy. I don't know if you've ever seen his book. What I enjoy is there's just so much new, and there's so much greater care in not only ancient history, but look, let's face it, whether you're atheist, whether you're Christian, whether you're Mormon, whether you're whatever religion, it really doesn't matter. Jesus is really the most famous, popular guy. Oh, it looks, are you still here?
We're back.
Oh, okay, you froze for just a second. No big deal. So what I'd like to do, if you don't mind, I have a couple of questions that I would like to ask you, Richard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's do that.
Just kind of bring us up to date, as it were. Your book, 2014, I think. Yeah, 2014. Man, that's 8 years ago. A lot can happen in 8 years, right? Yeah, you're back. Boy, it keeps breaking up a little bit, though.
Yeah.
Okay. So your book was written in 2014.
Or it was published in 2014. It took 6 years to write, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, of course. I meant that. Yeah, and I got to tell you, seriously, 6 years to write that size of book.
Oh, it's
very impressive.
And of course, it was that book. It was the 3 articles I published in academic journals, and Proving History were all compositions. They were all products of my.
Yeah, Proving History was also one of the better ones. Oh, you blinked out for just a minute. You should be back. I hope.
Yeah, we see the video going in and out, but your audio. Oh, yeah, your audio seems to be reliable. So
my audio's okay. So
far,
yeah, I don't. Well, your video's blanking out, but I don't know if I guess your audio is a little bit too. So let's just keep going, and hopefully it won't do that too much. what has been the impact of your research on the historical Jesus with biblical studies in Jesus in the last?
Oh, you think people?
So,
all right, hang on a sec. We're engaging tech solutions for
awesome.
the internet.
No problem. We are still here, and we are. Oh, here you go. Christine Garner says, "Am I dreaming? I have Richard's app."
Christus, yeah.
Yeah, I downloaded that app too. I've got that too. It's wonderful. I admire your work so much. I can't believe it. So many people I love to listen are on the same stream. Crazy. Yes, we're all bandying together for further light and knowledge that Father promised. I don't know if you understand that illusion, Richard, but I guarantee my audience does. That's one of the statements in the Mormon temples to Adam during the rituals. So, yeah. Oh, here we go. Trevor Luke saying great guy
Hey,
to you.
Trevor. Yeah.
You fellow Roman historians, I've had wonderful talks with Trevor, and he is a manimal, not an animal, a manimal, man. He's something else. So anyway, while Derek's working on that, why don't you go ahead and start talking? What do you believe is your impact in this area?
Yeah, it's hard to measure because I see. So since I published, there were like maybe 4 or 5 qualified people with relevant PhDs who were at least agnostics about historicity, and then maybe 1 or 2 more that at least admit it's plausible. Since then, it's gone to it's like 27 or 28 now. So there's been, so I don't know, I can't say that I did that, but it is peculiar. I published in 2014 and the number has tripled and quadrupled since then.
No, you're part of it. You're part of it.
I know I influenced some scholars like Hector Avalos because I know he read my book and reacted to it positively, but unfortunately he passed away far too young.
I did not know that.
Yeah. I think he had some sort of aggressive cancer that took him out.
I'm sorry to hear that.
It's a shame because I really loved his work. He was doing really innovative.
I've got his Bad Jesus. That was something.
Yeah, that's a classic, right? And that's the kind of thing that biblical scholars usually avoid doing, even the secular ones, because they don't want to anger their religious market. But Hector was like, "No, man, this needs to be said. Someone needs to do this research," and so he does it. But he was also relevant to, I think he gets a cite in my dissertation because he did a book on healthcare and Christianity in ancient Christianity. So the idea of the sociology of healthcare and how Christianity was moving into a market in the ancient world from that perspective, which is a clever way to analyze that. But yeah, so I don't know examples of, for instance, scholars who cite me yet and making a point. But I keep seeing scholars turning around to positions I've advocated. So a classic example is Staples, who's a student of Bart Ehrman's, came out with his book on Israel. And there's a footnote in there where he says, the old view that there's no pre-Christian idea of a dying and suffering Messiah is not tenable anymore. There clearly was, and he cites some key scholars there. It's hard to believe that wasn't inspired by the fact that I was pushing on that too, because I noticed that as this idea that there wasn't one doesn't hold up. Like when you check, there's tons of evidence that there probably was, or at the very least, it was highly plausible and it wasn't unusual. And so, now it's become in Staples' book a footnote saying that, well, no, this really, you should just come around to this position.
And what I think is interesting about your taking that stance, as we discussed today, I wanted to do a curveball on our audience, and I did. I think we pitched a hardcore curveball, whatever kind of pitch it was. It wasn't just a fastball. The fastball pitch is the typical mythicist, rant that we do. And today it was, we're going to discuss a priori Jesus existed. Now, who was he? And
I loved that. I watched an hour of it on my lunch hour.
It shows
it's a good show. Yeah.
Well, I liked it the most because it shows your flexibility as a scholar. Number one, that you're not a dogmatist in this fight, but also
you have to be as a scholar. Like I said,
Richard Carrier.
Right.
Well, like I said in the show, to do good history, you have to take seriously alternative hypotheses and be able to model them and test them. Like, how well do they predict the evidence, etc. And that's why, like in my book, I come to 1 and 3 as my top margin estimate for a historical Jesus, that's not a bad probability, right? Like that's a decent odds.
Yeah.
And to do that, like you have to actually see like how does the evidence fit this hypothesis, and so you do have to take the other side seriously. If you're not doing that, you're not doing history well, and so that's what makes it capable.
Dennis is here, but I
Hey,
was
Dennis, hi.
my
Thank you.
whole
I was just going to say that.
the whole gist I was getting at is that like mythicist or historicist, for him, that model of a pre-existent notion of a suffering Messiah figure or suffering servant motif actually fits in his model for historical Jesus even more powerful than what I typically hear some historicists use.
Yeah, there's often a sort of knee-jerk reaction against any of these suggestions and saying, oh my God, that would prove mythicism and we can't have it be true then. And so they attack the underlying theory, even though like I'm explaining like, no, actually it's totally compatible with historicity.
It is.
In fact, it would help you better understand historicist models and make better models of a historical Jesus if you include this stuff. This will become relevant later when I know one of the questions you're going to ask will come up.
Yeah.
But another example is Bart Ehrman attacked me originally in his book, Did Jesus Exist?, for suggesting that early Christians regarded Jesus as a divine being. And it's rather interesting that shortly after I published, now he comes out with a book where he's flipped over to my side on this and said that yes, in fact, right. Yeah. Well, since then he's come out with when did Jesus become God? Is that right? How Jesus became God? Where he completely flips to my side and is saying all the things that I was saying about how the definition of God and how there's a lot of concepts of like divine entities in Judaism. So there wasn't you don't have to adopt Trinitarianism to admit that the earliest Christians did regard Jesus in some sense as a divine being. And so he's got basically all the arguments that I would have cited the book if on the historicity of Jesus had he done this before, but no. Now he won't give me credit. So I don't know if I gave him the idea or not, but it is coincidental that it comes out after that.
If you want the credit, I'll give you the credit.
Yeah, so I see more of this, and I even think I don't think, for instance, that Robin Faith Walsh has read my work, but she's a part of the sort of scholarly movement I see on the Vanguard that's very like coming up at the same time I am, and they're actually seeing some of the same things independently. So like her idea of the literary structure, the fact that the Gospels are not just collections of oral lore, that they're actually masterpieces of coordinated literature. Like these are authors writing books. They've got a plan, right? And they're using the skills taught in the schools of the time. And Dennis, and Thomas Brody before him were pushing this idea for a long time, and people were ignoring it. And now, of course, it's starting to become mainstream.
Look, you can't get the backyard professor with names and him not go grab a book. I'm telling you.
There it is.
Yeah, that is
a hell of a book, and it's huge.
That influenced on the historicity of Jesus.
Book on Jesus. So.
Actually, multiple courses we've done, you have referenced this, especially in the Gospels.
Yeah. It's a masterpiece, and I think a lot of it's possible. I believe a lot of the content of that will filter into Dennis MacDonald's synopsis. Because I assume he's going to be thorough and include all of the different parallels. I'm really looking forward to this synopsis becoming published because
me too.
No matter what people think of the MacDonald hypotheses, that synopsis is going to be absolutely priceless and invaluable for looking at all of this evidence.
Absolutely.
And no one else would have done it. That's right. So we need this thing, and then here we have the scholars going to do it. I think it's almost done. I think it's almost out. Yeah. So that I really recommend to people, even though it's not out yet. I've seen parts of it already, and I can tell you it's another masterpiece. It's going to be a crucial reference in the field, as fundamental as any other that we have on our shelves.
And thank you, Richard, for. Is it okay if I call you Richard? I've been calling you Richard. Should I call you?
Yeah, absolutely, totally.
I consider you a good friend already, so you're just stuck with me, pal. But the thing I loved about your book, really truly on the historicity of Jesus, was when you introduced Dennis MacDonald's writings.
Yeah, you said you hadn't heard of that until you'd seen that.
Yeah, I said.
Right. Okay.
I said, what the authors had? Of course, once you see it, you go, of course.
Yeah.
Well, the Bible's authors used the Greek authors. That was very popular in that day. And so I personally so appreciate the fact that you brought out Dennis's materials, Dr. McDonald, because I bought every cotton picking book he wrote, and I've read them all, and I'm going to have him on my show. And he is here tonight. Thank you, Dennis. Good to see you, my friend. So
the work is valuable for two reasons, not just the point you just made, but also the methodology he developed, based on the works of Brody, but to give credit to that. But the methodology is widely applicable, right? So you can actually use that methodology to analyze New Testament use of the Old Testament, right? That's mainstream. Like, everybody agrees the New Testament riffs on the Old Testament. But if you really want to explore that in a rigorous way, you can use the exact same tools that Dennis MacDonald developed to do that with Homer. So and other authors, Euripides, for example. So they're very broadly usable tools.
Yeah, Dale Allison also took that subject. And
it's an example, right? You see
the whether you agree or disagree with him, Dale Allison rocks.
The one problem that we find, and this is a problem, I'm all in favor of anything like what we're reading right there, Dale Allison. I'm a huge fan of Allison's. In fact, I'm about to promote a course on him, The Quest for the Historical Jesus. The only problem, and this isn't his fault, is that the field is so exclusively focused on, and Dennis can almost finish my words at this point in the chat, on Hebrew Bible. Sorry.
Right, yeah.
They're so stuck on, and they're not wrong, because it's obvious they're riffing off of scripture, and this is Pesher going on and other things that are going on. But what really gets me is we in the Christian communities, the way we've been taught is to make sure those pagan no-nos, those non-kosher people don't touch them, because Mother Judaism is the mother who birthed Christianity. So you can't have another mother. Sad thing is, Judaism's been sleeping around for, centuries before this. And that's the fun part about it.
What an image.
I know, right?
Hey, I'm going to try to get some Jewish scholars on this show. Let's show some respect, will you?
Hey, they'll probably, if they're honest, going to admit, my daddy and mommy.
I know.
Yeah.
It's all good. Hey, let's go to this other question, you guys. This is a lot of fun. Thank you so much. Yeah. So let me give you just a quick rundown on this next question. The one in green.
Yeah.
I had an argument with a gal. Online, and she was actually ridiculing your book on Jesus. And she was saying, well, Carrier, he picked these 48 criteria, right? And so my question is, why those 48? I mean, they're stupid. And so I asked her, I said, well, ma'am, which 48 criteria would you suggest? Because he has to pick some criteria, okay? And quite frankly, he didn't pick just a meager 12. He gave us 48 criteria.
2 chapters,
almost
200 pages. Yeah.
200 pages of analysis. It blew me away, Richard. And I go, what would you do? And she said, well, I wouldn't use any of those.
Right.
So why?
What would you replace them with? She had no answer to that, right?
Of course.
Oh, of course. Yeah, right. Yeah.
You have cooties.
So for people who haven't read the book, I have 2 chapters. What I call background evidence, and I number each item so that it can be isolated and discussed by itself. Because I knew, if you throw a bunch of facts at people, they'll just blank out and just focus on the one thing they hate and ignore all the rest. So by numbering them, I force people to focus on these units of facts, so that let's debate this one unit and then not let anything else affect that. Mm-hmm. And that was the idea. So I gave them these numbers and set them up with a description of what the issue was. And they're elements of background knowledge. So they're basically statements of fact. Some of them are modal statements. They're statements of what's possible or plausible in context. And some of them are, this is what happened. And others are, this is what plausibly could happen given the facts that we know. And so I have 48 of these. And the reason those 48 are there is because in all my research that I was doing, and even conversations with scholars and such, I would repeatedly find things that I was finding in my research are just well-established facts, and yet that biblical scholars are not aware of. And one is the example of what we've been talking about, which is the dying Messiah motif. There's a lot of asserting that couldn't possibly be true. And there's actually, I'm finding a lot of evidence that it is, and there's scholars saying that it is. So And so a lot of other things like that. And then the dying and rising God motif and its influence of Hellenism on Judea, which now is mainstream. But back then there was a lot of scholars who hadn't heard
There's
of the.
still scholars. That's the problem, that are still trying to fight that whole Mother Judaism
Yeah,
birthed it all. And it's like, she's Hellenized too. I don't think you realize it. And anyway,
There are
sorry.
even scholars who are like, and these are not mainstream, but like real scholars, like actual professors with PhDs, challenging things like there was no messianism before Christianity and things like weird things like that. I'm like that. Okay, so I got to establish what are the ground facts that we're going to build on. Like we got to agree on some facts here. And so the 48 I picked are ones that I found in the literature were not present or were people were saying the opposite of or something like that. And I realized that, and yet they're ground facts. They're not like evidence for or against the historicity of Jesus. They're all compatible with a historical Jesus.
Yeah.
So they don't tell you what's true about Jesus. All they do is they tell you how to limit your hypotheses about Jesus, because whatever hypothesis you has to like agree with these 48 facts. And so I ended up with those 48, and then that's how that got constructed. And I find like as time has gone on since I published this, like more of those things that were controversial at the time are now becoming mainstream since then. And like I said, no one's citing me for this. It's just something that happened. So I can't say that I'm the cause of it, but it might be a lot of people are seeing the same things I am now, because we're all willing to like look at it with new eyes, perhaps, right? So that's the thing that
if you'd have seen my question, I asked Dale Allison Jr. a question about mimesis, criticism and pertaining to the Greek epics, and he looked at me and he goes, and I love him. He's one of the most honest Christians I've ever met, because he will say, I think Jesus was a failed apocalyptic prophet, but he still believes in him, which really does. My little fundamentalist brain can't get it. Okay. I'm like you, right? But I asked him about this, and his answer is quite interesting and honest. He goes, I don't know. There could be, and I've never been trained to think that way since 1970 something. He said, I've never thought that way and never thought to think that way. And so,
but it's nice to see that kind of honesty.
Yes.
in scholars. See, and I'm not trying to be my background in the Mormon apologetic materials, the way the Mormons teach you from 2 years old up to bear your testimony once a month, and fast and testimony, meaning I know this church is true. I know Joseph Smith's a true prophet. I know that there's a restoration. I know that Jesus is the Christ. 3-year-olds can't know that.
Right. Yeah.
Teenagers very rarely, seldom know that, nor do they give a flying flip. Let's get real.
Yeah.
But so this is a wonderful example of what stumped me as a Mormon apologist as well. As I was saying, why aren't our scholars dealing with this kind of research and scholarship,
Right.
analyzing the Hebrew and the Greek, and they're going into the other various cultures. And that is the one thing I have so appreciated with your materials. So I'm not trying to slobber all over your books, but damn, they really impacted I began buying Dennis MacDonald, and I found a wonderful dear new friend, and I've explored his stuff. I know Derek now, all because of you, Richard.
Awesome.
Okay, let's go to this next question. Okay. Oh, whoops. Let me shut Trevor off. Sorry, Trevor. Okay, so on the pink question, thank you for that answer, because I want to be able to tell folks, okay, look, I had Richard and Derek on my show, and I asked Richard that question. And so here is his response from the author. So thank you.
Right.
Thank
you can bullet that as two things. Just basically, each of those facts is something I found one scholar or another in the field wasn't aware of or didn't think was true, and yet was well established. And two, those are all things that are totally compatible with historical Jesus. So they're not evidence for or against, so that you shouldn't be scared of the evidence. It is the foundation that any theory we come up with has to build on or be aware of and compatible with. And so it's just the fundamentals, just basically set the groundwork that we're actually going to look at, and what is the context in which we're actually trying to test these two theories. And that's what those 48 elements do. They establish the context in which
so this is not a mythicist bias in these elements. You're saying that
Yeah, I mean, you could say that there's a motivational bias behind them. Like, to give you an example, the element 12, where I established that all baptized Christians regard themselves as brothers of the Lord. That obviously serves the aims of a mythicist argument later in the book. But the fact itself does not mean that Jesus didn't exist, right? So it is just a fact, though, that we need to cope with and accept, and not like knee jerk say that isn't true. So you have to like, okay, well, let's list the verses. Let's just establish this, so then we can move on, right? And so that's an example of why those 48 ended up there.
And just to tag on to that point about the Brothers of the Lord thing, I've interviewed historicist scholars like Ken Olson, who talks about the testimony and all that being Eusebius forgery. But specifically, he believes there was a historical Jesus, just like I do. And he was like, yeah, but I do interpret this Brother of the Lord passage of James and Galatians to mean a Baptist, or at least a Christian in some sense, whether he was like a separated special category. He doesn't take it as a biological. It could be interpreted that way, but he personally was like, I'm going to go with the thrust of the rest of things and just say that this is another Christian. And, there are people who disagree, and you can disagree. And guess what? Yeah. He doesn't mind if you disagree.
The thing I like about this is so often when you take a stance like you have, Richard, that is not mainstream, and of course everybody's going to label you, well, if he's not with us, then he's fringe. Forget that noise for the moment. It's not mainstream, but it's not for or against. It's not an either or. We need to get a base, just like we need to make a base of cultures and their information. And I see you doing so. So that's really important. Thank you. That's awesome. Great discussion so far. I appreciate you answering these questions on the fly. How many Bible scholars, this is the pink one, how many Bible scholars agreed with your mythic interpretation in the last 8 years? And I wrote this wrong, sorry. I put it, has it persuaded the field? Has it persuaded any in the field is more like it, because you're not going to change the field in just 8 years. But do you see an impact at all?
This gets to my earlier point that it's hard to measure who's actually being influenced by my work versus someone who's just coming around to the same position or a similar position on their own. But after I published the book, like I said, there was like 4 or 5 of us. And since then, now there's like close to 29. I can't remember what the count is, but I actually keep a list. I maintain it now on, I can't remember the name of the blog. It's a list of historians who at least think it's plausible that Jesus didn't exist.
And some are outright mythicists now that never publicly said it, like Carl Ruck.
Right, yeah.
That was pretty intense.
Oh, Carl Ruck. He is another author that I absolutely have bought everything I can get my hands on and studied. He is something.
Yeah, so if people are interested in following that, they can go and look at the list, and I have like the cited evidence.
Oh, good. Is that on your blog?
Yeah, it's on my blog, and I update it constantly. So as soon as I find out about a new person that I can document fits the list, I put it on.
Okay, good.
So it's now like, well over 24. So I can't say that these people are adopting or saying that my theory specifically is plausible, but they're at least saying that doubting Jesus is plausible. And I can say that there's only one theory so far that's been published under peer review and tested under peer review, if you count Raphael Lataster's book with Brill. So there's really only one scholarly version of the origins of Christianity without a Jesus that has gotten to that level, has entered the literature so far. So if people are saying that it's plausible Jesus didn't exist, well, the most plausible theory would then have to be the one that's passed peer review, would be my position on that. But I can't speak for other people. So it's hard to, like, no one just says, Richard Carrier convinced me like that. I don't have that data.
And thank you for your honesty. You're right. Of course, that question's kind of amateur, but I just wanted to get a feel.
It's almost like, let's take it to Dennis, our good buddy Dennis, and say, hey, Dennis, who in the field of scholarship is finally going, you know what? You were right all along. It doesn't usually work that way.
Right,
the way it does is they secretly go, well, there could be
Greek
influence, but they don't want to say mimesis. They want to say like, it's there, but it's just in the culture. And Dennis doesn't deny that either. But Dennis goes a little bit further and goes, in order to learn Greek, you have to read these damn books.
That's right.
And you can't not know these Greek epics.
Yeah.
And also the style of when you get to
These-
composition training in school,
Yeah.
in ancient school, when you get to the composition level, what you are taught is exactly what the authors of the Gospels are doing. So you know they got this training because they're using the same skills. And that's what mimicist criticism does, is it basically, it like does in reverse what the authors were taught to do. We're basically like developing criteria to detect when they've done this. But when we say this, we mean a thing that they were taught in school to do, right? So, and Dennis has shown this in his books. Birthing the New Testament has a whole huge section on this fact, and it's a well-established fact. So people shouldn't be shocked by it. But I think as a lot of people don't know this, this is one thing I found is like the compartmentalization of fields is, biblical scholars will be great biblical scholars, but haven't looked at any of the literature on ancient education. And so they might have some ideas about it because of little pieces they've read here and there, but they haven't, extensively read like what actually was taught, what skills were taught, and things like that. And it's easy to access. So, and there's a lot of things for me that's like this that I haven't gone a deep dive on. And I've done some like Q&A with Derek here that'll show up for Patreon subscribers will show up there. They'll pop up, and sometimes I have to say like I haven't dived that, so I don't know. So there's more stuff like that. But when people do say, I really probably should get up to speed on ancient education if I want to understand how the Gospels were composed, right? Like that. Sure. And I think that like that light bulb of that connection is something I think was Brody. Brody might have been the first to have done that. I don't know if anybody before him made that connection. It's like, we really can't study the Gospels if we don't do this. But then people kind of largely didn't react to it, right? Like, so it took a while for this to filter into the field. Like, oh, we should probably study how ancient education worked, right? So that happens a lot in the field. And so we're at the point now where I think more and more people in the field, especially the up and coming scholars now, like are up on this.
We've got some exciting future stuff coming up. Hey, I just want to point out to you, my good friends, Trevor Luke is also a Roman historian and an expert in Roman history. And he said that he's agreeing with you. That's a huge problem as far as I think, if I misquote you, Trevor, let me know, but the complete separation in compartmentalization of ancient history disciplines and ancient history cultures as if they all lived in isolation. We just know better now. And so it's wonderful that we're beginning to see a mesh of disciplines.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's also like the categories of fields of study. So like different things that you can study. Jewish demonology, right? Like you really can't understand Christianity if you don't study ancient Jewish demonology. But who studies ancient Jewish demonology? Well, you have to go look for the scholars who've done that. But if you don't think to do that, like, of course, all your arguments are kind of uninformed by the fact that you don't know these sort of background facts. This gets back to the background facts, the 48 that I thought were essential. Like the rest has to build on these. You got to know these things at least. But not everybody can learn everything, right? So this is, a problem. But there is like kind of an isolation between ancient history as a field and New Testament studies as a field. So you have that. And then you have New Testament studies, people will like dip into ancient history studies, but they're coming from a theology PhD background or a divinity PhD background. They haven't been given the ancient history training.
Right.
And so that sometimes creates a problem as well. It's a fixable problem. When you look at, like, for example, Dennis MacDonald's work, where like he dives in and gets, masters what he needs to master. Right. Yeah. Oh, that's an important book there because that's an edited anthology, right? That's a collection.
Yeah. This is one of the conferences on mimesis and intertextuality. I'm not kidding. He has some serious Ronald F. Hawk. George
This is a good example. Yeah. This is where scholars start getting interested, and now more people are talking about it. Yeah, that is an example of how it's not just Dennis MacDonald in his corner doing this anymore. There are other scholars that are like catching on now.
And it's so hot that the people who are more fundamentalist are reacting to it. They have to deal with it now. Now they're having, I got to silence this thing somehow.
And we got to come up with some apologetic. Yeah.
And that's a good thing. That means we're making waves.
I think so. See, this is what makes it exciting. I'm not going to lie to you, for us podcasters, is because we can get a hold of you scholars and we can ask you, okay, hey, what's new in the field? What should we look for? What should we look at? How are you reading this currently? Because a lot of scholars, through their research and studies, will begin to change some of their understanding and all.
Yeah.
In fact, that just leads me right into this. If you don't mind, Richard, I will just
Sure.
ask you this last question. Let you, your elaborations are so wonderful.
Mhm.
Have you personally found information or interpretation in your book on the historical Jesus that needs revamping and updating due to ongoing scholarship in historical Jesus studies, such as archaeology, textual criticism, history, etc.? Would
Yeah,
you?
that's a really good question, and that's a question I'm constantly asking myself.
Oh, good.
So far, there's nothing like fundamentally factual. Like there's like minor errors I need to correct. That might even be in the corrected edition now. There's supposed to be a corrected edition. I'm going to contact my publisher before the end of the year and find out if that's come out. But I just did a corrected edition, which is still first edition, but it's like a lot of little minor things corrected.
Right.
But then they've already asked me to produce and submit a second edition, which is a proper second edition that will have new information in it. And the one thing that I think needs to be changed is a lot of the places I think the way I've worded things has misled people. And so now I know like how to reword them so it's clearer as to what the point I'm making. So that's I think the main thing that I would want to change in the book is like some of the wording and make certain points clearer in order to rhetorically head off certain cliffs people jump off of as soon as they start reading the text. So that's kind of the main thing. And then of course there's been some research that I would cite that actually further supports what I'm already doing. So there's a lot, like just, for example, the Staples book, he's actually, not only did he make that note that I would cite, but he found some other scholars that I had overlooked. And so like and this is just making the point more stronger, right, of the book, right? It's just I'm finding more examples of this. But now, like Litwaw's book on history and the Gospels, and Robin Faith Walsh's book, these are things that now become relevant to supporting points that were already in there. So there's actually some scholarship I probably should front load and add to it. So that's another thing that I would change. But other than that, it holds up pretty strongly, especially if you read it carefully. Like I choose words carefully usually. Sometimes I flub that, but if people read it carefully, on the historicity of Jesus pretty much holds up. And so there isn't anything factual yet that I would change. There's like a few minor errors that I can't even explain. Like there's one point where I do a mimesis argument and I say that there's a passage in Exodus where Moses takes his top two disciples with him, and that I can't find where I got that. So that's a little minor thing that doesn't affect the conclusion, but it's a slight little error that I need to correct. That might even already have been corrected in the corrected edition. I'm not sure, but I can't remember which slot I put that into, the corrected edition or the second edition. But there's like little things like that, but nothing like really fundamental that's changed.
Good. That's interesting. Because it was, for one thing, I mean, let's be honest. Now, maybe not to the scholars, because they're probably pretty familiar with this field, I would imagine, some aspects of this field. Yeah. But for the rest of us, there is a lot in this book to digest. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not technically a scholar, but I read. And I mean, I read lots of books. But your book brought that's one reason I asked you about this 48 ideas with the background study. One thing is because you were trying to establish a Bayesian theorem approach, because that was your whole idea.
Yeah,
which
probability theory.
Yes.
I think if historians, if they're going to argue about what's probable and improbable, they really need to understand probability theory more than it's not taught. Like the logics and probability theory are not taught in history schools, graduate schools. Rarely, maybe occasionally, but it's not a normal thing. It really should be normalized. So like historians need to understand probability theory and logic better. There's another book that I recommend if you haven't read it, is Hackett Fischer's Historian's Fallacies.
Historian's Fallacies.
Yeah,
yes.
That's one of my favorites, and it's a good. It's kind of like a good book to read before or after proving history, because his whole point is he finds all these logical fallacies across multiple fields of peer-reviewed history, and he's kind of funny too. So he's witty, but he finds all these mistakes, and towards the end he says, there's got to be like some sort of methodology that would define a correct approach to history, and no one's found it yet. Is his concluding point, and I think like, oh well, actually I think I found it. And I would like to see more
Give it a
engagement
shot.
historians
Give
on
it a
that.
shot.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the other thing you established really well on your Historicity of Jesus book, and it was up at the front, which is what I really appreciated too. Number one, you established that the scholars are not done yet with the work, so there's great hope for us, John Q. Public, to
Yeah.
continue learning. But the other thing you did, which I really appreciated, was when you demonstrated the, and I know James D.G. Dunn is big on this, and I've read him quite a bit, which is unusual for a Mormon. I read him as a Mormon, and that was one of the things I was saying, hey, why the hell aren't we doing stuff like this?
Yeah, right.
This idea of, you showed the criteria of historicity in the third Jesus phase, the third Jesus
Quest. Yeah.
quest. Yeah, thank you. That the criteria just don't work.
You're right. Yeah.
I can't say it any other way. They just
yeah.
don't. And since then, hang on, I'm not leaving you. Hold on, I think I've got a James Dunn book.
Yeah, so for everyone watching, he referenced the LeDunn volume, which is an edited volume of multiple scholars who have reached the same point that, and in fact, I've used this text myself and cited it, but they've come to the same conclusion. I think that book came out the exact same year that Proving History did. So I think I don't cite it in Proving History because I missed it just barely. But that's a good example of parallel discoveries where I am making this point, citing all these other scholars, everyone who's studied the methodology and has published a study of the methodology. Every single one of those studies finds that the methods don't work. And I published this with these other scholars cited, Tucker and so on. And then at the same year, bam, LeDunn with his edited volume of multiple other scholars saying the same thing. It just reinforces the point, I think.
Jam it, Dim. I can't find the book, but they did a big symposium in honor of James Dunn, but they were showing how his approach to the criteria of history, excellent scholarship, of course, that's not the question, but it didn't have the ability to follow through to the finish because the criterion don't work.
Right.
It was the most polite symposium. James, you lost. The argument, right?
Yeah.
And I can't find the book, but I promise it exists. So
yeah, I found the same result, and people who read Proving History will see the results there. And I wasn't alone. I mean, I did find a lot of other scholars, and people were saying this. Like Morna Hooker wrote half a century ago an article kind of like this, where she was pointing this out, like your methods don't work, people. And these people are getting ignored. And I think now, we're reaching the point where scholars are starting to notice, our methods don't work. Maybe we should change them. And so it's a shame that it's taken so long to figure that out.
Well, it is, and there's been a lot of ink and gladly not a lot of blood yet spilled on it. Hopefully there won't be. We've had enough of that noise. It's time for us to all get together and dialogue and share our information and our differences and our similarities and recognize, look, we're all on the same side here of trying to figure out what is, right? And what isn't. And for Pete's sake, what works and what doesn't. If you don't have something that works, there's no point in just continuing to pursue that avenue. And I'm saying this out loud so that perhaps the Mormon leaders can figure that out.
Yeah, right.
Eventually. I'm not trying to diss on them, but wow. The reason I can't be an apologist anymore is because I can't defend the indefensible. And
I have not really thought of this, but I've tended to find Mormon apologetics much, much weaker than evangelical apologetics. It's like the evangelicals have figured out they need to up their game. And so they're sneaky in the way that they do this, but nonetheless, they're doing more serious scholarship, even when it kind of undermines them. Now this is resulting in certain people getting fired when they overstep the line, right? So they have to tread the line very carefully as what's safe to say and what's not. But you're seeing that happen in a way that, if you compare it with Islamic apologetics, also is 100 years behind everybody else because it just hasn't been tested as much, hasn't had to deal with the kind of criticism. It's not getting out in the world and doing that, right? It sounds like Mormons are doing the same thing. That's kind of hurting their own field.
Thank you for saying that. That's important. I do know I have Mormons in my audiences, and I do know I have Mormons watching this, and that's important to say, not in a manner of, being rude and saying you're not with it, you got to get with it. But quite frankly, you're not with it yet. You do have to get with it.
There's work to be done. Yeah, right.
Beautiful way to put it. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah. And it's, here's the catch with that is the leadership are really squeamish about coming to conclusions that they don't like. And so in a way, the scholars are hamstrung somewhat. They are getting a little bit broader and capable of there's a little leeway, not a whole lot, but anyway. So, okay. Unfortunately, I don't have a call-in line like they do on Mormonism Live, so I can't have anybody call in. We've got just enough time we've only got 1 hour. These guys have been busting their butts. I am so sorry. Tell us what you're up to. What have you been?
Yeah.
I take my eyes off you two for 5 minutes. And
this is literally the last work
doing.
thing that we're doing.
After this, we're kicking back, legs up.
Yeah.
So
I fly home tomorrow. So.
Thank you for coming on tonight. Then
what we did, just to make it brief, and if you feel like elaborating, feel free. Yeah. But we planned it out to do 6, and we decided to do 5 once we realized what kind of can of worms we opened up.
It's a lot of work.
It's unbelievable. So maybe in the future we plan another thing. 5 college course level material, systematically taking you. It'll be online. It'll be edited. It'll be a purchasable course that's affordable.
It'll be, each one is an 8 lecture course. And with the lectures come syllabi, like with suggested readings. And really it's going to be just, a lot of visual and audio information as you watch each lecture. And then if you want to dive further, like the suggested reading. So you have a scholar telling you what things are the important things to read, right? So like that's one of the values of it. But also you just get to like hear and watch the presentation of the information. And so we're doing this with 5 courses. I've got New Testament studies for beginners. So basically if you want to like analyze the Greek of the Bible and you're not a master of Greek, you haven't taken Greek courses, there are tools that can help you. You won't be as good as a scholar who knows Greek, but there's more access to that biblical text, the underlying Greek text, created by online tools than I think for any other literature that I can think of. Although Perseus is the Perseus at Tufts, which is a site that I teach. I have a lecture where I teach people how to use the Perseus mechanism online, which is a free resource for exploring Greek grammar and definitions and things like that. They're building out their Arabic and they're almost complete with their Latin collection as well. So they started as only Greek, but now they're building out other languages. But the tools are amazing. And so part of what we do in New Testament studies is teaching that, like, how do you have these skills? How do you get at the literature? What do you do with the literature and all of that? And then I've done mythography of the Gospels. So I talk about what is myth and then go through all the Gospels and why they're myth. And then the mythography of the Gospel according to Mark, where I just show the entire Gospel of Mark as myth, like just entirely. It's not history. It's not oral lore. It is well crafted, brilliantly crafted. In fact, once you get done studying these things, you realize like how genius these authors were, right? They're doing it in a low dialect, right? Like a popular dialect, but these guys are not bumpkins. Like they're master literary authors. Anyway, so that's another course. And I do Naturalism as a Worldview, which is basically for people who want to know, well, what do you believe if you're not going to believe in God? Like, so it's a positive belief course. So it's not about like why you should ditch God necessarily. It's about like, well, what do you replace it with? How do you explain the world? How do you explain beauty? How do you explain all of these things? So it's that kind of course. And you get into morality, politics. Like, how do you approach all these things once you've abandoned a biblical basis for it?
And all of this is in your course.
Oh, this is just one course. No. We have 5 courses.
We have 5 courses.
And there are 8 lectures, and they're at least 4, maybe 5, maybe 5
now how do we tap into these courses, Derek?
When they're out, I'll get you the access to the link. And in fact, I'll make sure that you're hooked up. So if anyone purchases the course through you and they're affordable as it is, you can also, it'd be supporting you to make a commission
Well, thank
on
you.
selling the courses, educating the general public, and it
Mhm.
also helps the people who are selling the courses. So it's an incentive for everybody. The scholar
Well,
gets paid.
thank you. Yeah, that's very nice.
Yeah.
The scholar gets paid. The people who are selling the courses get paid. And then, of course, the people buying the courses technically are getting
Yeah.
paid with such
Paid.
amazing information and
Fantastic.
lots of reading up. It'll have MP3 in case you can't watch it and you just want to listen while you're on a walk or mowing the grass, whatever. You can
Nice.
drive listening to it, not have to watch it. There's a
Although
lot of
they
stuff.
all do contain a lot of really interesting visual
Visuals.
information. So
I
there are
would
visuals
imagine
important,
so. I would want the visual.
And it's all in 4K,
So
extremely high quality content.
Oh, nice.
these will probably drop one by one across next year, right? So just keep your eye out for that.
Okay,
That's
excellent.
right.
Yeah,
Conservative
Oh, I'm
mythology.
excited.
So
Woohoo.
we already have one that's public with M. David Little on 7 ancient mystery cults.
And that's a really good course. I recommend that. Like, it's a really good coverage of the subject.
And he talks about like literally the Eleusinian, on Isis, Osiris, you name it. Like,
yeah, he goes through the mystery
Pymander's-
cults, what they were, and all of that. So it's a nice
Mithras,
book.
you didn't skip Mithras, did you?
I don't think he gets into Mithras as one of them. And he didn't need to. When you watch it, it's like, whoa. And he compares it to Christianity at the end of the day, and you see a lot of mystery language. But then the one that's coming out next is Delcy Allison Jr.
Yeah.
It's really a
Oh, cool.
historiography of the quest for the historical Jesus, and how, just to give you a little tease, you got Protestants. What are they doing? Protesting the Catholics. What are they protesting? All these made up BS miracle claims that the church is claiming saints have performed. Plus the indulgences are happening. All this stuff's going on. So now they have reason to criticize, and they criticize rightly all of the erroneous nonsense that the Catholics said. Then, because they wanted to be consistent, they started to take that scalpel that they used on the Catholics and realized, hold on, our Bibles, something's up. Even Martin Luther kind of hints at it when he goes, this book
Is nothing sacred, brethren.
Right. Yeah.
I know. So next thing you know, it was actually thanks to the Christian Protestants from which all of our Mormons derive their tradition.
Sure.
Everybody kind of comes out of.
So the Allison course goes over the history of questioning the Bible from the beginning all the way to John, well, I guess John Dominic Crossan is the last author he gets to. So if you want to like study like how has this changed
And
over
who the
last-
main figures, Schweitzer, Friedrich Strauss, all of these major historians.
All of them.
He examines them up close in this lecture course to get you. And then
so you can see how the study of the New Testament has changed over the last few hundred years, and especially like the last couple decades, right? So so that's a cool course if you really want to like arm yourself in that.
I think
topic.
anyone, even Christians who are within, should
Yeah,
check
that's
this
true.
out.
Yeah.
Because if you think it's these non-Christian, our other worldview that's driving us, you need to look inside of your own community to realize it was Christians who saw it and were being honest as much as they humanly could that started to come to these conclusions. And all we did was recognize, yeah, they're on the right track. You know, so it's amazing to see that a Christian is the one that comes up with this. Also, James Tabor on the Gospel of Mark, but then we've got 5 that are going to come with him. I've got John Dominic Crossan coming up. I've got Robin Faith Walsh coming up. There's all of these college level courses. We're going to make them accessible and affordable.
Now, listen, I'm going to say this on public to put you on the spot. Sorry, don't kill me.
Yeah.
But I need you to tap me into these scholars, and I can help tout these courses.
Yeah.
With you. I would love to be a part of this, man.
Well, when his courses come out, we have an affiliate program where not only you can make an incentive for anyone who signs up for the courses, but we'll give a window of time for the academic. And some academics maybe are different about their time, but give like a 15-minute window to promote the course and why they need to get this course and things like that. And that'll give you the option to promote it. I mean, you're going to love the content without a doubt. It's good material. I know that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No,
You
it's
guys, I just can't say how fun this has been. I can't say it enough. Thank you again for we're out of time, so we're gonna head off for now. For my audience, thank you for watching, and I've appreciated all your comments, and we will continue our analysis of biblical scholarship and ancient history and discussing the relationships of all of the various interlocking literatures. Richard, if I can say so also to you, if I can ask you, may I have you on my show again so that we can go more in depth in some specifics?
Yeah, absolutely. I can be difficult. Like it might take like a couple months. We need to schedule like a couple months in advance, but absolutely. This is what I do for a living, and I love doing these shows. So absolutely.
Well, I'd love to have you back if you would. That would be a ball. So yeah, we'll get together and I'll make that happen with you, man.
Yeah,
I'm looking
cool.
forward to that. And you, Derek, young man, you and I have a date with destiny as well.
Yes, we do.
Okay, you guys, thank you so much. I appreciate you showing up.
Guys.
To my audience, we will be back on Sunday for Radio Free Mormon. I have him on Sunday. He is the single most Mormon influencing podcaster who is no longer technically a believer on the planet. So you won't want to miss this show. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be talking about Elder David Bednar's current discussion on why critics are unreasonable. And so we will discuss why we don't think we are unreasonable.
Fantastic.
So Sunday at 6:00 for all of my audience, and for you two gentlemen also, you're more than welcome to come on this live show again, and we'll get you hooked up with Radio Free Mormon. So thank you, you guys. We're going to head out. We're going to let these guys get some rest. Appreciate all your support. We will catch up with you Sunday. Have a great evening and be good.